Imagine this. A 19-year-old kid. A pistol. And a wrong turn down a one-way street. That's it. That is, genuinely, what killed 20 million people. Not a grand military strategy. Not a decades-long conspiracy. Not a powerful emperor sitting in some gilded throne room, deciding he wanted to conquer the world. A wrong turn. He had already failed. Earlier that same morning, he had stood on a street corner with a loaded pistol and watched his target drive away untouched. He gave up. He wandered to a nearby deli, sat down, and was mentally preparing to go home a failure. By the summer of 1914, Europe had achieved something genuinely remarkable. It had built the most sophisticated, interconnected civilization the world had ever seen. And yet, underneath all that aristocratic warmth, Europe had quietly constructed the most dangerous political machine in modern history. Kaiser Wilhelm II of Germany was a grandson of Queen Victoria. He was a first cousin of both Tsar Nicholas II of Russia and King George V of England. These men called each other Willie and Nicky and Georgie in their personal correspondence. And yet, the continent had divided itself into two armed blocs. And these alliances were bound together by a web of treaties, mutual defense agreements, and secret protocols that were supposed to guarantee stability. They did the exact opposite. Those alliances were not clean, simple agreements. They were layered, conditional, and in several cases, deliberately ambiguous. Britain's commitment to France was so vague that the British cabinet itself, sitting around a table in London in late July 1914, genuinely wasn't sure what they were legally required to do. But before we get to the diplomacy, we need to go to Sarajevo. June 28, 1914. A hot Sunday morning. And the most consequential bad day in the history of tourism. Archduke Franz Ferdinand, heir to the Austro-Hungarian throne, had decided to pay an official visit to Sarajevo. The annexation of Bosnia had been deeply controversial. And a web of Serbian nationalist groups had decided that Franz Ferdinand's motorcade through Sarajevo's open streets was an opportunity too good to waste. They recruited 7 assassins, armed them with pistols and bombs, and positioned them along the Archduke's official route. 7 assassins, for one open-top car moving slowly through a crowd. By any reasonable calculation, the mission should have been over in seconds. It very nearly wasn't over at all. A 19-year-old named Nedeljko Kabranovic stepped forward, knocked the safety cap off his bomb against a lamppost, and threw it directly at the Archduke's car. The bomb hit the folded-back convertible hood and bounced off. It rolled under the following vehicle and exploded. Kabranovic immediately swallowed a cyanide capsule and jumped into the river Miljacka to escape. The cyanide didn't work. It had apparently been stored improperly and lost most of its potency. And the river, which he had apparently imagined as some kind of dramatic escape route, was about 4 inches deep. The 7th and last assassin, Gavrilo Princip, watched the cars disappear and made a decision. He gave up. He wandered to a nearby delicatessen and stood there on the pavement, probably wondering how he was going to explain the morning's failure. The mission was done. The lead driver turned onto Franz Joseph Street. The wrong street. The governor shouted at him to stop. They had changed the route. The driver braked. The car stalled. Right in front of Schiller's delicatessen. Where Gavrilo Princip was standing on the pavement, roughly 5 feet from the road, with a loaded pistol in his coat pocket. He later told investigators that he could not believe what he was seeing. He thought, for a moment, that he was imagining it. The Archduke's car had simply stopped in front of him. Not moving. Engine stalled. Franz Ferdinand sitting in the back seat, clearly visible, not 10 feet away. Princip stepped forward. He raised his pistol. He fired twice. The first bullet struck Franz Ferdinand in the jugular vein. The second struck his wife Sophie in the abdomen. They were both dead within the hour. And the match had been struck. Austria-Hungary had made a decision before the investigation was even complete. They wanted war with Serbia. Not a world war. The men in Vienna wanted a small, quick, surgical war. In and out. Done before anyone could object. The problem was Russia. On July 5, 1914, Kaiser Wilhelm II gave Austria-Hungary his unconditional backing, a promise that if the conflict with Serbia escalated, Germany would stand behind them completely. He called it a calculated risk. He genuinely did not believe Russia would fight. He was wrong. In 1908, when Austria annexed Bosnia, Russia had protested loudly, and then done nothing. The German and Austrian leadership had filed that away as a reliable pattern: Russia makes noise but doesn't fight. They were pattern matching to the wrong scenario. Russia was not going to back down this time. Austria-Hungary spent 3 weeks drafting their ultimatum to Serbia. And here is something that almost never gets the attention it deserves: the ultimatum was deliberately designed to be rejected. When British Foreign Secretary Sir Edward Grey read it, he called it the most aggressive document ever sent by one state to another that still considered itself independent. What happened next stunned everyone. Serbia accepted nearly every single clause. Their reply, carefully worded, diplomatic, conciliatory almost to the point of self-abasement, agreed to the vast majority of Austria's demands. Kaiser Wilhelm read the Serbian response on July 28 and wrote in the margins of his own copy, "A great moral victory for Vienna." With it, every reason for war disappears. He was right. He knew he was right. The Serbians had surrendered almost everything. Austria-Hungary declared war on Serbia the very next day. Because by then, the machine was running. The decision had been locked in. And no diplomatic miracle was going to stop it. The telegram exchange between the two cousins is one of the most heartbreaking documents in modern history. They addressed each other as Willie and Nicky. Nicholas wrote that he needed Wilhelm's help to avoid a catastrophe that neither of them wanted. They went back and forth, night after night, even as their armies were already beginning to move. Russia ordered mobilization. Tsar Nicholas believed he was threading a needle, a measured, controllable step. His generals told him it was impossible. Partial mobilization, as a military reality, did not exist. The entire mobilization structure had been designed as a single integrated system. You could not mobilize against Austria without simultaneously preparing for Germany. So Tsar Nicholas, the man who had been personally telegraphing his cousin Wilhelm begging for a diplomatic solution, authorized full Russian mobilization on July 30th. The two cousins writing letters to each other had lost control of their own war machines. On the morning of August 1st, Kaiser Wilhelm received a telegram from his ambassador in London. The message contained what appeared to be a British proposal: if Germany agreed not to attack France, Britain would guarantee French neutrality. Germany could fight Russia on the Eastern Front without worrying about a second front in the West. Wilhelm was electrified. Moltke went completely white. He told the Kaiser it could not be done. The entire German war strategy was built entirely around the Western offensive. Every train schedule, every supply depot, every division's deployment orders had been written around this sequence. To reverse the Western advance within days was not a strategic adjustment, it was an operational impossibility. Moltke held firm, and reportedly wept. He later wrote in his memoirs that he felt, in that moment, that something inside him had broken, some inner certainty that never returned. The British offer, as it turned out, was a miscommunication. Britain had never actually made that proposal. The moment had passed. The trains were already moving. Germany declared war on Russia on August 1st. On August 3rd, Germany declared war on France and began its invasion through Belgium. On August 4th, Britain declared war on Germany. In 5 weeks, from a stalled car outside a Sarajevo delicatessen to the full mobilization of every great power in Europe, the world had gone to war. Most of them had volunteered. Young men in Britain, France, Germany, Russia, and Austria-Hungary had lined up at recruitment offices with genuine excitement, convinced they were enlisting in something noble and swift. Their governments told them it would be over by Christmas. Their newspapers told them it was their generation's great moment. They went to the Somme. They went to Verdun. They went to Gallipoli and the Eastern Front and the frozen mountains of the Italian Alps. They died in mud. They died in gas clouds. They died in the same few hundred yards of Belgian farmland that changed hands so many times the ground itself became unrecognizable. By Christmas of 1914, just 5 months after that stalled car in Sarajevo, over 1 million men were dead. 1 million. In 5 months. The men who survived came back changed in ways their families couldn't understand and their societies weren't equipped to address. We call them the Lost Generation. That name was not chosen carelessly. And all of it, every single death in those 4 years of mechanized slaughter, traces back through that tangle of miscommunications and miscalculations to a stalled engine on a Sarajevo street on a June morning. All of it traces back to a wrong turn. Nobody wanted a world war. Not one leader, not the Kaiser, not the Tsar, not the Emperor Franz Joseph, not the British Foreign Secretary, sat down and said, "I want to start a war that will kill 20 million people." They all made what seemed, in the moment, like rational, limited, calculated decisions. Austria-Hungary wanted a small punitive war. Germany wanted to signal resolve without actually fighting. Russia wanted to support Serbia without triggering Germany. Every decision, at the moment it was made, had a logic. Every choice felt contained. But they were operating inside a system none of them fully understood. When you make decisions inside a system you don't fully understand, based on information that is partial or wrong, under time pressure that doesn't allow for reflection, the gap between the choice you think you're making and the consequence that actually unfolds can be measured in millions of lives. The American diplomat George Kennan called World War I the seminal catastrophe of the 20th century. He meant that almost every major disaster that followed, the Russian Revolution, the rise of fascism, the Second World War, the Holocaust, the Cold War, the reshaping of the Middle East, grew directly from the wreckage of that first war. Pull that one thread, and the entire century unravels differently. And that thread begins with a driver who didn't know the route had changed. A car that stalled in front of the wrong deli. A 19-year-old who had already given up. The story of how World War I began is not a story about forces too large for individuals to control. It is a story about how badly things can go wrong when the people responsible for making decisions stop genuinely communicating, start assuming the other side will blink, and allow institutional systems to run faster than human judgment can keep up. Those conditions are not unique to 1914. Subscribe to Epic Trail Stories. Every week we go into the corners of history that textbooks pass over, the hidden decisions, the near misses, the moments where everything almost went differently. Next week, the most dangerous night of the Cold War that almost nobody knows about. I'll see you then. Don't take any wrong turns.